Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's presentation. My name is Marissa, an attorney with Legal Aid of North Carolina's Helpline. Today, we have a Shira presenting for us. If you are unfamiliar with the format of this event, first, a Shira is going to review a PowerPoint presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. If at any point during the presentation you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box on Zoom or the comments section on Facebook. We'll review all questions put in the chat boxes during the Q&A session at the end. Please remember that this is a public forum and Legal Aid is not representing you at this time. Ashira will go over this in more detail, but please remember to keep your questions as general as possible as we cannot provide any legal advice specific to your individual situation. The session will end when there are no more questions, and regardless of where we are, we will have a hard stop at 4:30 p.m. With all that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Ashira to get us started.
Hi, my name is Ashira Gorpening. I'm an attorney in the Greensboro office. I practice in the Public Benefits Department. I'm going to talk a little bit about SNAP today, or as it's more commonly known, food stamps. We're going to go over a little bit about the application, how to maximize your benefits, how to recertify, and then just going over some of your rights associated with SNAP. So first, what is SNAP? SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's also known as Food and Nutrition Services in North Carolina, or FNS benefits. And then, like I said before, food stamps. SNAP is a program that provides low-income households with money each month to help them purchase food. The money is placed on a reusable EBT card, and it can only be used to purchase eligible foods. So the application process for SNAP. First of all, you can apply a few ways: in person, by fax, by mail, or on ePass, which is an online application. Keep in mind that every applicant has the right to file an application on the same day if they visit a DSS office during their office hours. So whatever your local DSS office is, you could go there to fill out an application, and you have the right to fill that out on that day that you go, so long as it's during their business hours. After you submit an application, you'll have to be interviewed by a DSS caseworker, and they'll review your application from there. Here's a link on this PowerPoint that I do believe will be posted. If you have more questions or need more information on how to apply, that link will give you more info. So there are some basic eligibility rules for SNAP. Generally, to be eligible, you have to have an eligible immigration status. You need to be a resident of North Carolina, and then you have to also meet their income rules, which we'll talk more about. There is an additional requirement for some people, which is a work requirement. Sometimes they're waived during public health emergencies. For instance, during COVID-19, they were waived. But since COVID, they've now restarted. So these work requirements are something that some people will be subject to. Regarding immigrant eligibility, the eligible statuses are if you're a U.S. citizen, if you're a lawful permanent resident. If you are a lawful permanent resident, you generally can't receive your SNAP benefits until 5 years after you've lawfully entered the U.S. Other eligible statuses are refugees, asylees, and then Afghan special immigrants and parolees. Keep in mind that not everyone in the household has to have an eligible immigration status. So when you apply, you can just apply for the members in your house who have an eligible immigration status. And if you do that, DSS can't require you to provide a social security number for those in your household who are not applying for the SNAP benefits. So you could still apply for those that are eligible. Some households are what's called categorically eligible. This means that they have an income that is below 200% of the federal poverty line with no disqualified household members. There are no asset limits for categorically eligible households. One rule in regards to SNAP is the felony controlled substance ban, which means people who have committed and then were convicted under federal or state law on or after August 23rd of 1996 of any offense that's classified as a felony by the law of the jurisdiction involved with an element of the possession, use, or distribution of a controlled substance are permanently disqualified from SNAP. There are some exceptions to that permanent disqualification. For instance, if you are a person who was convicted of a class H or I felony, and that involved possession, use, or distribution of a controlled substance committed on or after August 23rd, 1996 in North Carolina, you can reestablish your eligibility for SNAP if you meet the minimum disqualification period after your release from custody, which is 6 months. And then you're also referred to Area Mental Health Authority for assessment. So that's something to keep in mind if after that date of August 23rd, 1996, you have this sort of felony. Going back to the work requirements that I mentioned earlier, to continue receiving SNAP benefits, you have to, and you're an able-bodied adult without dependents, that means you have to have work requirements. Those are 80 hours of work per month, which it even averages out to about 20 hours a week, or be participating in a work program that's 80 hours a month or 20 hours a week. That work can be employment, just regular employment, self-employment, volunteer work, work that is in exchange for goods or services, or a combination of any of those. There are some exceptions. One here is a good cause exception. If you've worked 80 hours in a month, but you had to miss some work with good cause, you'll still be considered to have met the work requirements if that absence from work was temporary and you keep your job. So an example of good cause is if you were sick and had to miss work, had an emergency in your household, or you were temporarily unavailable because of transportation issues, but you keep your job, then you could make this good cause exception for the SNAP work requirements. But if you don't meet these work requirements or an exemption, you can only receive SNAP for any 3 months in a 36-month period. There are some exemptions to the work requirement. If you're under 18 years old or 55 years or older, if you're in a SNAP household that has a member that's under 18, so if there are any kids in your household under the age of 18, if you're pregnant, if you're homeless, for veterans, and it's regardless of the conditions of your discharge, and if you're between the ages of 18 and 24 and you were in foster care when you turned 18, or you're exempt from the work requirement if you're unfit for employment. Unfit for employment can be any of the things listed, including you're receiving workers' compensation, disability, or Medicaid, and that's based on your disability. If you're medically certified as unfit for employment, if you're unable to work due to alcohol or drug addiction, at least half of the time you're a student, and if you're, quote, obviously unfit for work based on workers' observation or judgment. Those are some of the exemptions from that work requirement of 80 hours a month. So you have to report your work activity if you're not exempt. If you're an able-bodied adult without dependents, you report your work activity to DSS. You should report work activity to DSS if you believe that you meet an exemption, and you should not assume that DSS already has correct and updated information in your file. Some examples of things that you should report or think about reporting are whether you've moved, if your phone number has changed, if you've recently started working, if your work hours have changed, if you're now living with a child who's a minor, even if that kid's not yours, or if you're receiving Social Security disability or unemployment insurance benefits, or if you've recently become pregnant. Those are some things that you should report to DSS. We're going to talk also a little bit about maximizing your SNAP benefits. So your county DSS, which is Department of Social Services, determines what your household's monthly SNAP benefit is based on income, household size, and expenses. And the household size is people who live together and buy or cook food together. That's what DSS considers to be a household. Generally, higher monthly income means the household receives less SNAP benefits. But if you have higher monthly expenses, you should receive, as a household, you should receive more SNAP benefits. And here's a chart that kind of gives you a reference of household size and then what you could potentially be eligible for in terms of SNAP. So there are some verifications that are required, and those are necessary to determine your eligibility for SNAP. And then there are recommended verifications that are optional, and those recommended verifications are used to determine like the level of benefits that you receive. Now, it's in your best interest to provide the recommended verifications because you want to do whatever you can to increase your benefit level, and providing those recommended verifications would ensure that you get all the SNAP benefits that you're entitled to. So required verifications, the ones you have to do to determine your eligibility are, you have to verify your identity, citizenship or immigration status, household size or composition, and then social security number only for those who are applying, and income. While recommended verifications are the ones that may increase your benefit level, and those include utility expenses, mortgage and rental expenses, property taxes and insurance, medical expenses, legally obtained child support payments, and child care expenses. So while those recommended ones are not required, you should report them just to maximize your benefit level. Now we're going to talk about recertifying for SNAP. You have to recertify in order to maintain eligibility for SNAP. Usually that's every 6 months. So what happens is every 6 months, DSS will mail your household a form, and you have to return that form to DSS by the 15th day of the last month of the certification period. Now that's to avoid a potential lapse in SNAP benefits. So best practice is to submit all required and recommended verifications at that time too, that you submit your recertification. The 15th day of the last month of your certification period can be kind of confusing. So there's an example here that shows, for instance, Julie's household is certified for SNAP benefits from January 1st to June 30th. So in June, Julie would get a recertification form. In order to recertify timely, Julie should complete that form and send it back to DSS by June 15th, because the last day of her recertification month would be June 30th. And then again, you should also submit recommended verifications when you submit the recertification. So there are some changes that you should report during the certification period. So you've already become eligible for SNAP and you've started receiving benefits, and you've not yet received a recertification form. That's your certification period. And you have to report if an able-bodied adult without dependents stops working that average of 80 hours a month, or if anyone in the SNAP household receives lottery or gambling winnings that are $4,250 or more, or if the household income goes above the 130% of the federal poverty level. A household isn't required to report an increase in expenses or decrease in income, but you should, because reporting those things could increase the amount that you receive each month in SNAP benefits. So a little bit about appeals to help kind of know your rights. You do have appeal rights. So if you disagree with an action that DSS takes and that action impacts your SNAP benefits, then you likely do have appeal rights. And what an appeal means is that you want to request a hearing about a decision that DSS made. So what you should do is read the written notice from DSS, because it will explain your appeal rights, and also, very importantly, the deadline that you have to appeal will be in that written notice from DSS. So you know what time frame you have. There are kind of two types of SNAP hearings that you could potentially have. One is a state fair hearing, and state fair hearings are about your eligibility, about your benefit amount, or about an overpayment if one is issued to you. And then there are administrative disqualification hearings, or ADH, and those are for intentional program violations. So at a state fair hearing, an opportunity for a state fair hearing must be provided to any household negatively impacted by a DSS action that affects the household's participation in SNAP. To appeal one of those decisions, you have to make a clear statement. It can be oral or written to DSS saying that you want to present your case to a higher authority. Now, generally, a request for fair hearing has to be made within 90 calendar days of the date on that DSS notice. However, read your notice to know what your deadline is. In many cases, DSS should continue your SNAP benefits at the prior level if the request for your hearing is made within 10 days. So best practice is to request that hearing within 10 days to try to maintain your SNAP benefits while you wait on your hearing. A state fair hearing is conducted by a state hearing officer, and that would be a hearing officer with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. An administrative disqualification hearing is used only when DSS believes that it has clear and convincing evidence that an individual has committed one or more acts that are intentional program violations, or an IPV. An IPV occurs when a SNAP household member knowingly, willfully, and with deceitful intent commits a fraudulent act. And those fraudulent acts include making false statements or hiding information to get the SNAP benefits when you weren't eligible for them, or misusing an EBT card, which includes selling or trading SNAP benefits, or using SNAP benefits to buy food for or share food with someone that isn't a part of your SNAP household. So what will happen is a household will receive notice that they're being accused of an IPV, which again is an intentional program violation. And that notice will include a date for that administrative disqualification hearing. DSS usually includes a waiver form in that notice that they mail to you, and it says that you can agree to just waive the disqualification hearing and accept whatever consequences are from the IPV. Importantly, you don't have to sign that waiver. You can go to your hearing, present your case, and give whatever evidence you have against DSS. You don't have to sign that waiver that they include in the notice. Now, the hearing officer for a local disqualification hearing is different than a state fair hearing. It's actually someone at DSS, and they're not a person who's been previously involved in your case. So the hearing officer has to provide the SNAP household with a copy of whatever decision they make in their case, and it usually comes via certified mail. Once you get that decision from a hearing officer in an administrative disqualification hearing, you have 15 calendar days from the date on that decision to appeal again. After an appeal, your household will then have a state disqualification hearing again, and that will be with a hearing officer from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. An intentional program violation is pretty serious, and there are consequences of an intentional program violation. Your first IPV would result in 12 months of disqualification from SNAP. If you were to get a second IPV, that would result in a 24-month SNAP disqualification. And a third IPV would mean that you're permanently disqualified from receiving SNAP. If you misrepresent where you live or your identity to get multiple benefits, that would result in a 10-year SNAP disqualification. And really importantly, if any of these intentional program violations occur, all adult members of the SNAP household could be jointly responsible for paying back the benefits that your household should not have received as a result of the intentional program violation. So everyone can be on the hook. You do have rights as a SNAP household during the hearing process. Before the hearing, you can go, or your representative can go and review the case file that DSS has and whatever records they have and they plan to use at your hearing. You have a right to review that. You can also represent yourself at a hearing. You can get an attorney, or you can have some spokesperson that represents you at this hearing that talks about whatever evidence you have or whatever rebuttal you have to DSS. You can bring your own witnesses, submit your own evidence, like records, receipts, and other statements that will be helpful to your case. You have the right to do that. You can also question or challenge any testimony or evidence that is presented by DSS. And then lastly, you can request what's called a postponement of up to 30 days if you need more time to prepare your case or if you want time to find an attorney. That's all I have. So at this time, I'll answer any questions. Marissa did say earlier that questions must be general and I can't really give legal advice about your case, but I'm happy to answer any general questions.
Awesome. And so if you have a question, you either need to type it in to the Q&A box on Zoom or in the comments section on Facebook. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, but going to give it just a moment here to see if any do come in. You cannot unmute in this forum, so if you have a question, you do need to type it. As I am not seeing any questions, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to all of you for joining us, with a special thank yous to Ashira for presenting for us. If you would like to review anything we talked about today, we have posted a recording of today's event to our Facebook page. It will be immediately available. You can access this recording with or without a Facebook account at www.facebook.com/legalaidnc. You can also, about a week from now, you can also access this recording at any time on our YouTube page. If you would like to register for one of our other Listen and Learn presentations, such as tenant rights, child custody, Medicaid rights and eligibility, you can do so on our website at legalaidnc.org/clinics. Thank you all so much, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.